Send invitations to all the princes of every kingdom. The one Prince Ayan chooses will become his bride.
Don't even think about marrying that girl. The beggar is not fit to become your queen.
When that wealthy prince extended his hand for marriage, the girl sitting before him was no princess. She was a beggar from the street. And at that moment, everyone was laughing, but no one knew that the beggar was not even human. This is the story of a Mahan king, Sultan Zafar, whose rule was not limited to just one city or region, but stretched from the Arab lands of Sham to distant deserts, lush valleys, and major trade routes. In his court, justice was upheld in such a way that even if an ordinary man came forward with a complaint, the Sultan himself would listen. His decisions were strict, but always based on truth. The palace was built of pure marble, towering pillars, golden gates, and an atmosphere filled with fragrance. Yet despite all of this, there was an emptiness in the Sultan's heart. And that emptiness was his son's marriage. Prince Ayan, rich at heart, Sultan Zafar's only son, Prince Ayan. Ayan was not filled with arrogance and pride like other princes. Instead, there was a strange softness in his eyes and a deep fear of God in his heart. He would often stand high above in the palace, looking down at the common people and think to himself, "These people are human just like me. Then why is their life so difficult?" He secretly helped the poor and never told anyone about it. A world of beauty, yet a restless heart. When Ayan came of age, talks of his marriage spread across Arabia. Every day, new portraits of princesses would arrive at the palace. Some had beautiful eyes, some wore royal attire, some belonged to powerful families. But every time, Ayan would look at the portrait and quietly say, "Not this one." Sultan Zafar grew worried, but he knew his son was not ordinary, and neither was his thinking. At last, after many days of deep thought and restlessness, Sultan Zafar made a grand decision. He sat upon his royal throne in the court, a vast hall with towering pillars illuminated by golden chandeliers. Courtiers stood respectfully in their places, and a strange seriousness filled the air. Deep thought was visible on the Sultan's face. He remained silent for a few moments, as if weighing his words. Then slowly, he raised his head, and in a dignified, echoing voice, he said, "We have thought long and carefully." The entire court fell silent. Every eye turned toward the king. The Sultan glanced across the court, then firmly announced,
Send invitations to all the princes of every kingdom. The one Prince Ayan chooses will become his bride.
"A grand ceremony will be Ayojit, a ceremony unlike anything ever seen in this kingdom before." The courtiers began looking at one another. Whispers spread across the hall. The Sultan continued, "In this ceremony, princesses from distant lands will be invited. Every princess known for her beauty, wisdom, and noble lineage." The atmosphere grew restless. Everyone now understood what this announcement meant. Sultan Zafar raised his hand, restoring silence. Then in a strong, decisive tone, he declared, "And my son, Prince Ayan, among all of them, will choose his own bride." His words echoed throughout the court. Some faces lit up with joy, others were filled with shock, and in some hearts, a deep curiosity had already begun to grow. As the Sultan concluded, he said, "Preparations must begin immediately. We want this ceremony to reflect the true grandeur of our empire, so that the world may witness what kind of bride Sultan Zafar chooses for his heir." With that, the Sultan fell silent, but the echo of his words still lingered within the walls of the court. From that very moment, a new wave of activities spread throughout the palace. Servants rushed in every direction, messages were sent out, and preparations began for a ceremony that would soon change everything. That day, The entire royal palace did not look like an ordinary place. It felt as if a piece of heaven had descended upon the earth. A grand hall had been prepared, covered in red and golden carpets with edges that shimmered with pearls and precious stones. Meanwhile, the massive doors slowly began to open, and royal caravans from distant lands started to arrive. With each procession came guards, servants, and royal protocol, and from every caravan, a new princess stepped inside. Some were dressed in golden attire, some wore jewelry that sparkled under the lights, some carried an air of confidence and pride. Every princess appeared unmatched in beauty, grace, and royal presence, as if the beauty of the entire world had gathered in one place. People whispered among themselves, "Such a gathering has never been seen before." But despite all of this, there was a strange silence hidden in one corner of the palace, as if something was about to happen, something concealed behind all this beauty. But when that magnificent ceremony finally came to an end, the atmosphere of the palace suddenly changed. Where moments ago, laughter, glowing lights, and whispers had filled the air, now a strange silence had taken over, as if the entire palace had fallen under an unknown sorrow. Prince Ayan stood there. The calm remained on his face, but the light in his eyes had disappeared. There was no joy, no amazement, only a deep, silent sadness sinking into his heart. For a moment he paused. He slowly lowered his gaze, as if he were asking himself a question, but there was no answer. Then, without saying a single word, he quietly began to walk toward the grand doors of the palace. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty hall, as if with every step, a decision inside him was growing stronger. He met no one, nor did he look at anyone. It felt as if he wasn't walking away from the crowd, but from his own thoughts. As he stepped outside the palace gates, a soft breeze brushed against his face. But he didn't stop. He kept walking, as if searching for something neither the palace could give, nor the crowd, nor all those princesses, something that could truly complete his heart. And even he didn't know what that thing really was. In the silence of the night, as the cool wind gently passed through the trees and a mysterious stillness filled the air, Prince Ayan was walking alone on a deserted, dimly lit path a short distance away from the palace. His steps were slow, and his mind was lost in deep thought. When suddenly, his eyes fixed on a strange sight ahead. The beggar, who was not ordinary, a girl dressed in torn, dust-covered clothes, sitting quietly on the ground. Her hair was messy, her face covered in dirt, yet despite all of this, there was a strange depth and calmness in her eyes, as if she wasn't connected to her condition, but to some inner certainty. Prince Ayan stopped for a moment, and for reasons he didn't understand, he couldn't take his eyes off her. At that moment, a passerby placed a simple piece of bread in front of her. The girl picked it up in her trembling hands and silently looked at it for a few seconds. Just then, a weak, hungry dog slowly approached her. Hunger and hope were clearly visible in its eyes. The girl didn't hesitate even for a moment, no doubt, no second thought. She gently placed that same piece of bread in front of the dog and quietly watched it. Something inside Ayan broke, and something new was born. He stepped closer and said, "You gave away your last piece of bread?" The girl softly replied, "If I am hungry, Allah will feed me. But if this one dies, it has no one." Those words pierced straight into Ayan's heart. The next day, as the sun spread its soft golden light across the desert, Prince Ayan returned to that same deserted path. Even he didn't know why he kept going there. His heart simply pulled him back. The girl was there again, sitting quietly, her gaze fixed on the ground as if she had no connection to the world at all. Ayan gently approached and asked, "Why are you here every day?" Without lifting her eyes, she replied, "I stay where I am needed the least." That answer settled deep inside Ayan's heart. Now it had become a routine. Ayan would come every day, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just to talk. And the girl, with just a few words each time, would say something that shook Ayan to his core. She didn't laugh much, nor did she complain. She simply endured everything in silence. And that silence was drawing Ayan closer to her. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us how you liked the story. One day, when there was a slight chill in the air and the sun was close to setting, Ayan sat down in front of her. For the first time, his eyes held not just seriousness, but emotion. In a low voice, he said, "I don't know who you are, but I do know this. You are not ordinary." He paused for a moment, then said, "If I take you away from this life and bring you with me to a place where there is respect and peace, will you come?" For the first time, the girl looked at him and very softly said, "I do not want what pleases the eyes. I want what brings peace to the heart." That sentence became the final seal in Ayan's heart. Ayan returned to the palace. He was restless, his heart weighed down by a decision. Standing before his father, Sultan Zafar, he said, "I will marry that girl." Silence fell across the palace. Then suddenly, voices erupted. Courtiers began looking at each other. What is he saying? A beggar? The prince's wife? This is an insult to the empire. The voices grew louder. The calm of the palace shattered. But Ayan stood silently. There was no fear in his eyes, no doubt, only certainty. Sultan Zafar looked at his son in silence for a moment, then slowly said, "If your heart is truly firm, then I will not stop you." And just like that, the door of destiny opened. The palace was filled with a strange atmosphere. Some were unhappy, some were shocked, and some were angry. But Ayan stood apart from everyone, looking only at that girl. And the girl was still just as quiet, as if the noise of the world meant nothing to her. After the marriage, everything in the palace appeared normal, nothing unusual, no strange events. The girl continued to live quietly in her place. She spoke little and never complained. Prince Ayan kept coming close to her, but even now, no one knew her true reality. A strange silence fell over the palace. The wind seemed to stop. The flames of the lamps began to dim, and clouds gathered in the sky without any season. At that very moment, Prince Ayan suddenly began to feel unwell. His strength faded quickly, as if something unseen had touched his life. The atmosphere around him grew heavy, and an unexplained fear spread through the palace. By morning, his condition had worsened drastically. A burning fever spread through his body. His breathing became difficult, and he grew so weak he could barely open his eyes. Fear spread across the entire palace. Physicians were called, prayers were made. But instead of fading, the illness only grew worse. Night fell once again, and at that very moment, the girl quietly entered the prince's chamber. She stood there, watching him. For the first time, there was chinta on her face. Slowly, she placed her hand on his forehead, and instantly, her entire body trembled. The moment her hand touched Ayan, a powerful shockwave spread across the room. The lamps went out, the wind began to rage wildly, and the ground itself seemed to tremble. The girl stepped back immediately, her eyes widened in shock. The ancient restraint within her heart began to shatter, the command that had bound her. Until a human touches the truth of your power, you shall never return to your true form. And now, Prince Ayan's illness had crossed that very limit, triggering her true power. A blue light began to glow around her body. Everything in the room started to shake. Her torn clothes dissolved into light. Her hair lifted into the air. Her eyes turned a radiant blue, and her face transformed into a supernatural beauty, unlike anything seen in the human world. She was no longer that beggar. She was the Jinn Princess, Badr-ul-Jamal. Her voice echoed, "This illness was never yours. It was the final door of my imprisonment. And now, I am free." Prince Ayan was still half conscious, and the Jinn Princess, standing in her true form, was quietly watching him. And for the first time, there was no fear on her face, but a strange, emotional peace. Prince Ayan was still in shock. The blue light in the room slowly began to fade, but the girl's presence was no longer the same. She was no longer a beggar. She had become something else, a being whose eyes held both power and pain. With a trembling voice, Ayan asked,
So you were just a beggar, weren't you?
The one you would accept when Seerheart was a beggar in your eyes.
"You? Who are you? What is all this? You were the same beggar, the one I married, right?" She remained silent for a moment, then slowly fixed her gaze on him, and in a calm yet heavy voice she said, "What you saw was not my truth." Ayan was stunned. "Then who are you?" She took a deep breath. "I was never an ordinary beggar. A powerful jinn placed a curse upon me." Pain echoed in her voice. Because of that curse, my power, my beauty, my true identity were all taken from me. And I was trapped in a form where I could neither truly live nor die." She paused. Then a strange light flickered in her eyes. "And the condition was? I could never return to my true form until a human accepted me from the heart in that broken state." Ayan fell silent. She slowly stood upright, and now her voice carried royal authority. "And there is more. I am not just a Jinn princess." Ayan looked at her in shock. "I am the Princess of Koi Jamal." Her voice echoed across the room. "And the King of Jamal is my father. I belong to a kingdom hidden from the eyes of humans." Ayan staggered slightly and said softly, "Then why did you hide all of this?" She looked at him and gently replied, "Because destiny wanted to test who would accept me without my truth." Silence filled the room. Ayan stood before her, and she, in her true identity, had become a reality beyond human imagination. The silence in the room still remained. The blue light slowly faded from the walls. Ayan was still trying to process everything. Just then, Badr-ul-Jamal lowered her gaze, and in a soft voice that touched the heart, she said, "The way you were drawn to my truth, my simplicity, my sincerity, and the purity of my heart." She paused, her voice growing even softer. "In the same way, your truth, your vision that sees beyond outward beauty, it has made me fall for you as well." She stepped forward, and for the first time, a human emotion shimmered in her eyes. Softly, she said, "I did not just accept you in marriage, Ayan. I accepted you from the deepest part of my heart." There was no magical intensity in her voice now, only a softness that reached straight into the heart. You saw me when I had lost everything. No kingdom, no identity, no power. Yet, you did not reject me. Prince Ayan stood silently, looking at her. Countless questions filled his heart, but in that moment, no words came to his lips. And the Jinn princess was no longer just a supernatural being. She was now a heart beating for someone for the very first time. The blue light had completely disappeared. Now there was only silence and the sound of two hearts beating, and destiny was quietly writing its next chapter. Time slowly slipped away like sand through fingers, and those moments that were once questions began to turn into a beautiful reality. A new chapter had begun in the lives of Prince Ayan and Princess Badrul Jamal. Now they were not just companions, they had become partners of the heart. The atmosphere of the palace had changed. Where once there was silence and politics, now there was a strange sense of peace and love. Ayan now sought Badrul Jamal's opinion in every decision, and she too began to understand his thoughts. They would often sit together in the palace gardens, silently feeling each other's presence. There were no excessive words, no noise, only a quiet conversation between hearts, and that silence was strengthening their love. During this time, one day, a shadow of grief fell upon the kingdom. Sultan Suleiman had reached the final stage of his life, and then, one day, he passed away. The entire palace was thrown into mourning, the court was drowned in sorrow, and every eye was filled with tears.
After the Sultan's passing, according to the laws, the throne was handed over to Prince Ayan. Now he was no longer just a prince. He had become the new king of a great empire. King Ayan. The dreams of youth were no longer in his eyes. Instead, there was the light of responsibility. Badrul Jamal was no longer just his companion. She had become a hidden part of his strength. Whenever a threat rose against the kingdom or a rebellion began, strange things would happen. Enemy armies would weaken before even reaching the battlefield. Kingdoms would surrender without war. Now, every new day brought a new announcement. King Ayan has conquered another kingdom. Another state has bowed without bloodshed. Even the distant tribes of Arabia have submitted. People were amazed. Some said, "It is his wisdom." Others whispered, "It is the effect of some unseen power with him." There was only one reality. The presence of Badrul Jamal, wherever she was, destiny itself changed its course. Yet she never took pride in her power, and Ayan never saw her as his strength, but as his blessing. Love plus power plus kingdom now. Ayan's life stood upon three things: the responsibility of the kingdom, the love of Badrul Jamal, and the unseen help of destiny that followed him. And with time, this was no longer the story of an ordinary king, but of a kingdom that the world began to call the Blessed Empire. One day, a massive and terrifying attack suddenly fell upon Ayan's kingdom. The sky filled with smoke, the Al-Ard trembled, and enemy armies attacked from every direction. This was not like any war before. This was the final battle. King Ayan himself stepped onto the battlefield with his army. Swords clashed. It was not a war of blood, but a war of destiny. At last, the kingdom was victorious, but Ayan himself was gravely wounded. As soon as the battle ended, Ayan was brought back to the palace. 3 poisoned arrows were lodged in his body. His breath began to fail. The light in his eyes faded. He slowly began to lose consciousness, and finally, his eyes closed. Badrul Jamal cried out, "Ayan!" She held him in her arms. Tears filled her eyes. At that moment, that same blue light burst from her body, and she called out loudly, "My father, King of Khoi Jamal!" A thunderbolt struck. The sky seemed to tear apart, and then, with a great Noor, Badrul Jamal's father, the King of Jamal, appeared, along with his entire spiritual army. He descended and immediately saw the situation. The King of Jamal said seriously, "These wounds are not ordinary. His survival is almost impossible." Badrul Jamal trembled, but then he said, "There is only one way. If you give all your magical power, your identity, your existence as a jinn princess, everything to Ayan, then he can be saved. But after that, you will become a normal human." Badrul Jamal did not think for even a moment. She gently placed her hand on Ayan's forehead and closed her eyes. A powerful surge spread across the palace. The blue light began to leave her body and enter Ayan. The arrows were forced out of his body. His wounds began to heal. His breath slowly returned. But at that very moment, Badrul Jamal collapsed to the ground, and her body became that of an ordinary human. After some time, Ayan opened his eyes. He immediately rose and said, "Badrul Jamal." He lifted her into his arms, but she was no longer the same. No longer the one who shined with blue light. Now, she was just a human. The King of Jamal slowly explained everything. "She has sacrificed all her power to save you. She is now a normal human." Ayan held Badrul Jamal close to his chest, and for the first time, without power, without a kingdom, without magic, he felt love alone. Badrul Jamal opened her eyes and softly smiled. "Now, I am no longer your strength." Ayan held her hand and said, "Now, you are my life." From that day on, King Ayan and Badrul Jamal began a simple yet peaceful life. There was no magic, no pride of throne or crown, only love and a bond that had been completed through sacrifice. Allah never abandons those hearts that walk the path of truth, patience, and sacrifice. And in the end, He gives them more than they could ever imagine. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us how you liked the story.